I moved into a small apartment, Unit 3B, in an old building in northern Brooklyn, New York. After losing my job in the city, I had to find a place that was cheap, a place that fit my budget, which was completely empty. This building was just like the ones you see in old movies, its walls cracked and saturated with the smell of moisture and grease accumulated over the years. Its elevators were old, screaming and swaying as if they were going to collapse at any moment. I noticed that the neighbors tried to be friendly. On my first day, while leaving my apartment in the morning, I met Ms. Evelyn, who lived in the unit across the hall. Evelyn is in her 50s, working long shifts at a nearby supermarket. She said to me, with a tired smile etched with wrinkles, "Hello, my son. Welcome to your new home." The neighbor in 4B, Mr. Harrison, is a very quiet man. He has lived alone for over 10 years. We only see him when he goes out to buy his food or take out the trash. He lives completely alone. No visitors, no family, not even friends. Then she let out a light laugh and said that the man was just an eccentric, harmless soul. The conversation seemed normal on the surface. On the third night, as I lay on the cheap bed I'd bought from a secondhand store, trying to sleep after a long, exhausting day, I heard dozens of voices coming from Harrison's apartment directly next to mine. Muffled laughter and fast overlapping whispers, the sound of a woman crying softly, then suddenly choking, and the voice of a man singing an old song in a trembling tone, as if he were trying to hide his pain. I jumped off the bed, my heart pounding at a high rate. I paced the room for a few fleeting seconds, then pressed my ear against the cold wall. The sounds were terrifyingly real, not from a television or a radio, because they were changing and overlapping, as if many people were sitting in one room, talking under pressure. In the morning, I asked Evelyn about these sounds. She told me with the same confidence, "Harrison, my dear, lives alone. I have known him for many long years. He has no wife and no children." Then she gave an uncertain smile, but I felt that something was completely wrong, and that this would be the beginning of my end. I continued to hear the sounds for several days. I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours a night, and the lack of sleep caused me to lose focus. I tried to convince myself that they were hallucinations due to stress and because I wasn't used to the new place. But every night the sounds would return, stronger, as I sat alone in the dark. I could hear dozens of souls groaning and pleading inside the apartment of a man who lives alone, according to the neighbors. The days that followed became unbearable. Every night, at exactly 11 o'clock, the sounds would start again without exception. Sometimes they were sudden, hysterical laughs, as if people were trying to hide their intense terror, and sometimes muffled screams, as if they were coming from throats gagged with cloth or hands. I once heard the voice of a man with a clear Latino accent saying, "Please, I have a family. Let me go back home." Then the sound of repeated hits and punches, and after that, a heavy silence that would last for hours. I couldn't explain what was happening, and I was too shy to ask Harrison about these sounds. Also, I refused to invade his privacy or enter his apartment. During the day, Harrison would go out like any normal human being. A man in his late 60s, his hair a stark, snowy white. His body was thin and strangely fit. He walked with slow, calculated steps and carried large shopping bags full of canned food tins and water bottles. One day, I stood with him in the elevator. He gave me a cold smile that didn't reach his gray eyes, which were like pieces of ice. He said in a very quiet voice, "The weather is lovely today in Brooklyn." I didn't comment on what he said, but his eyes made me terrified for no apparent reason. I asked the rest of the neighbors, one by one. The man from the third floor who works as a taxi driver said Harrison was completely alone. "I see him return alone every time from work at the warehouse. The manager, Mike, the fat man who loves to smoke cheap cigars, shrugged his shoulders and said, "There are no official complaints. The apartment has been his for years, and his record is clean. If there were loud parties or noises, I would have known and evicted him." But I'm sure that I am not crazy. I started recording the sounds every night on my phone, long hours of whispers, moaning, and fragmented words. In one clear recording, I heard the voice of a little girl saying, with a trembling voice, "I'm hungry, don't hurt me again." Then Harrison's own voice, quiet and cold, as if he were talking about the weather. He said, "If you don't stay quiet, you'll be like the others." I decided to go to the police after collecting more than 10 recordings. The officer shook his head and said, "These sounds could be from a movie or other neighbors. The man has a completely clean record, and there are no previous reports." I left completely frustrated and returned to the building, thinking about moving out immediately. But fear and a morbid curiosity kept me in the apartment. I started watching Harrison from afar. I noticed that every 2 or 3 days, he would go out with large quantities of medicine, food, ropes, and adhesive tape, and sometimes with heavy black bags on a rainy, freezing night. I decided to follow him instead of entering his apartment. I waited until I saw him go down in the elevator. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, he had a large, heavy black bag with him. He was wearing a black jacket and a hood over his head. I went down after him quietly to watch him, and I kept a safe distance between us in the rainy street so he wouldn't feel or notice that I was watching him. The rainwater was falling on my face, and I was shivering from the cold and terror. I followed him for a long distance until he reached an abandoned industrial area. It was close to the waterfront, a place full of old warehouses and dim lighting. I hid behind a rusty dumpster and saw him meet 2 men in a black van without license plates. They opened the trunk, and I saw large plastic bags that they were throwing into the river, bags stained in certain places with a dark red color. Even in the dark, it was clear that it was blood. I heard their whispered conversation. They said, "The new shipment is ready, the ones in the apartment. We finished with them today. We moved them before they noticed." One of them let out a low laugh and said, "Harrison, you do clean work." Through their conversation, I understood that the apartment was just a temporary stop in a large network of kidnapping, extortion, and illegal trafficking. They bring people at night to interrogate them or torture them, then move them or get rid of them. And the neighbors are all either afraid or uninterested or part of the general silence. I ran back to the building, wet and terrified. I called the police from my phone and described everything. They arrived an hour later, and when they searched the apartment, they found it completely clean. Harrison was sitting there drinking coffee, and he said calmly, "This neighbor of mine, he imagines things. I live alone, just like everyone says." The officers suspected me and said that this stalking was illegal, and there was no material evidence. From that day on, I started noticing small changes in my apartment. Sometimes my belongings would move from their place. Silent phone calls in the middle of the night, and the sound of light footsteps in the hallway. In front of my door, the neighbors started avoiding me. Evelyn doesn't respond when I say hello. I became frustrated, and I felt that the police and the neighbors were complicit with Harrison. I decided to leave everything as it is. I am now sitting in the dark. The door is locked, and the weapon is by my side. Harrison will return tonight, and this network is bigger than me, and bigger than the local police. If anyone is reading this, don't move into a quiet building in Brooklyn.
And if you hear sounds from the neighbor's apartment, don't say anything. I won't be able to escape, and the coming morning might not come for me.